Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. I want to kind of set some expectations first before I present. I am not very good at presenting. I'm naturally an introvert, so things like this really stress me out a lot. I'm 27 years old. When investors ask me to tell me about my background or tell them about my background, I kind of say I was at school and then I dropped out of school and I started Owlet. That's kind of the story, the history, right? But I hope that as we go through Owlet and kind of our journey, I really believe in student entrepreneurship. I think it's the best time of life to start a company. There's a lot of help and support for students that doesn't exist for 30 and 40-year-olds. And people really want to help students. It's also the time of life where, oh, Derek, that's my brother-in-law. I didn't know you were in this class. Hey D. Sorry, I also have ADD. So it's a time of life where you get a lot of support and help. It's also the time of life where you don't have 5 older children that all have financial needs and you feel very tied to your career path and what you've chosen and you have that huge weight of responsibility that's sitting on you. So it's a time to take risk as well. I really believe in that, and I've seen a lot of other successful students in this area that have done really great things. So this is the entrepreneurship lecture class, right? And there's also an executive lecture class. And you get to choose between the two, right? You have to take one or the other one, if I understand right. So how many people in this room want to start a company someday? That's incredible. That's really cool. Okay, well, I hope that what I have to say is helpful. And when I'm done, feel free to ask questions. This won't be like a perfect, polished presentation. What I want to do is kind of go through our investor pitch a little bit that gives you an overview of the business and some of the success that we've had over the last year. We launched a year ago. And then I'll dive into kind of the early idea phase and validation phase and how we went about doing that, where we started and some of the challenges that we went through. And then we'll open up for questions. So Owlet, at its core, we like to think about Owlet as a health platform that connects the health of baby to mom and to pediatrician. Young children don't really have a voice. They can scream or sleep or poop. That's about it. And so smart hardware can really help us bridge the gap between the hospital and the home and can help us understand more about how baby's doing and be more proactive about caring for infants. The product that we've released first is called Owlet, the Owlet Smart Sock. It's a little baby sock that monitors baby's heart rate and oxygen levels and communicates all of that information to your smartphone. We also track information about baby's sleep quality, movement, and skin temperature. We haven't released those features yet, but we're gathering all that data and looking for ways that we can make that actionable for parents. The sock communicates through Bluetooth low energy to a base station. The base station sits on parents' nightstand and glows different colors based on how baby's doing, and then all of that information is sent from the base station to the cloud, so you can see your baby's vital signs remotely from anywhere in the world. The technology that we use is called pulse oximetry. It's the same technology that they use in the hospital setting. When you go into the doctor and they put that little red light on your finger to measure your heart rate and oxygen, it shines light through the skin, and based on the amount of light that's absorbed, you can determine the heart rate and oxygen levels of the patient. So we've taken what's traditionally a big box that costs $2,000, has cords coming out of it, and is notorious for false alarms. And we've condensed that into a little baby sock. It's wireless, it's 1/100th the size, it's 1/10th the cost, and we've done all of that on the same level of accuracy. The sensors we've designed have all been designed in-house by engineers that I met in college, so student engineers that figured out how to create this, and we've clinically validated this with hundreds of babies in the hospital. The other great thing that we've done with Owlet is we've taken a hospital-grade technology that's really absolutely inappropriate for the home. When you think about cords going into the crib, a big box that mom would have to carry around with her, and we've made it appropriate for the home setting. And one of the big things we've done is we've reduced the number of false alarms that these hospital monitors give. Doctors have actually stopped recommending that pulse oximetry be sent home from the hospital because there's so many false alarms, parents stop using it, and it actually creates more anxiety. So it was one of the big things we've had to overcome. Owlet false alarms 120 times less than the hospital monitors. We've done that by combining multiple sensors into one form factor so we can filter out false alarms from movement. And we've also made the technology really easy to use. Moms don't think about it as like a sensor that you have to attach to the foot. It's just a little baby sock that they slip on at night, and it works. So nurses and doctors will often have a hard time finding where to place the sensors to get a good read, and we've designed it in a way that parents can do that very easily. We also take all of the information. This has been a big challenge. There's a lot of information that's being collected every 2 seconds on baby. And in the hospital, all that information is displayed in real time to a nurse. But for parents in the home, they really don't need to have all of that information, and that's overwhelming. So we've condensed all of the kind of the user experience into just a glowing light. The base station will tell you if something's wrong. When everything's good, it's got a nice soft green glow to it and reassures parents. So the app kind of becomes an accessory. Over a period of a few weeks, parents put down the app and they just trust that if something's wrong, Owlet will alert them, and it's allowed to be kind of in the background so that they can focus on being a great parent and have extra assurance. And that's the experience that we've really designed around. In an age of data with Fitbits and Jawbones and all of this kind of quantified self, we were really tempted to kind of go down this path of displaying a ton of information to parents, and we decided that what parents needed was less, not more, and they wanted more assurance and to stop worrying. And so we've designed the experience around that. It's been a great thing to do. But what is this solving? What's the real problem that we're addressing? We like to compare Owlet to the early car seats. 40 years ago, nobody used a car seat. You brought your baby home, held them in your lap, and that was an okay thing back then. But in the 1970s, 400 babies passed away every year in car accidents. And so this innovative company created the safety seat. And in the beginning, it was just neurotic parents that would use these safety seats, and you'd strap your screaming baby into. Any parents out there know that babies don't like to be tied down ever. But you'd strap your screaming baby into this car seat, and it kept them safe. So over a period of about 7 years, 50% of parents had adopted car seats, and it became mandated by law that every parent leave the hospital with a safety seat. And now my wife and I left the hospital 6 months ago with our daughter Summer, and they actually walked us out to the car and showed us how to install the car seat because it keeps babies safe. There are 4,000 babies that pass away every year, this year in 2016, at night in their sleep. These are healthy babies that pass away from what's called SIDS and accidental suffocation in the crib. It's 10 times the problem that car seats were trying to address. And now that we have hospital-grade technology that we can move to the nursery in a home-appropriate, reassuring way, we really believe that 5 years from now, every baby that leaves the hospital is going to have some sort of health monitor that they come home with. And we've seen that this has already taken an effect. The very first family that we helped was a little over a year ago. They were beta testing Owlet for us. Their daughter had a critical congenital heart defect that didn't get caught in the hospital. And Owlet was notifying them that the oxygen levels were abnormally low for extended periods of time. They took the baby into the pediatrician, and they found out that the baby actually had a hole in the heart that they didn't catch in the hospital, and they were able to get her the treatment that she needed. Since we launched last October, we've had 26 families now that Owlet has alerted for in life-threatening situations. There's been 4 babies that had congenital heart defects that went undiagnosed, babies with severe RSV. A very common thing is that moms who are exhausted at night, they're breastfeeding baby, and they fall asleep on top of the baby. And Owlet's able to alert that's going on. They've been able to get up and get the baby breathing again. So it's a really incredible thing. We expect that in the next year, we'll have another 115 cases like this. So it's working, which is fantastic. And it just leads us back to this vision statement that 5 years from now, we really do believe that health sensing technology is going to be ubiquitous in every home. We're also in a different age, right? So I was looking at this Twitter post, and it was showing the adoption of telephone technology and TV and all of these different technologies over a period of years. And then it showed Angry Birds. And Angry Birds got to 100 million users in 34 days. And it's because we live in this connected, sharing social age. Owlet's seeing a really positive effect from social media, which is our primary form of marketing and content discovery. And we have 36 million views on our Facebook video. There's hundreds of thousands of followers and lots of people that are talking and commenting about this, which has led to a really great, our first year, we're already at an 18 million dollar run rate. We'll close 20 million in sales this year. Next year we expect to be 60. And this is just the first year of sales, right? And it's because we live in this connected age. We believe that this effect, this car seat effect, is going to happen a lot faster than we even anticipated because of social media. The other great thing that Owlet has done is we've effectively bridged the gap between the coasts. A lot of new products sell really well in California and in New York. And per capita, Owlet sells a lot more monitors in middle America than on the coast, which is where more babies are being born, right? So we've been able to effectively bridge the gap of early adopters to the early majority, if you guys have read some of those books. And the cities that we do the best in are like Akron, Ohio, obviously Salt Lake City, because that's where we're from, Denver. So per capita, we're selling 10 times as many monitors in Salt Lake and in Akron than we do on the coast. So we've been able to bridge that gap. We've also seen this really great thing with income demographic. We started with most of our customers made over $100,000 a year. Now the average is about $63,000, which is very close to the average income for the United States. We have a lot more families buying the product that make $30,000 a year than make over $100,000. So we're bridging that gap. And it's because Owlet is seen as a need to have and not a want to have. In entrepreneurship, you might think of it as like a shark bite pain versus a mosquito bite. And we have on GoFundMe, which is a crowdfunding site, there are 60 families that have launched crowdfunding campaigns to buy Owlets for other families in need. We have 4 foundations that have started in the last 6 months, just centered around buying Owlet monitors for families that are coming home from the NICU. And so that's another thing that we believe is going to drive this technology forward. The other way we think about Owlet is that we're collecting the largest data set of infant health that's ever been collected. Every 2 seconds, we get a biometric read on baby's health, sleep habits, and some of the habits of the parents. And so we're storing all of that data on our database, and we can't imagine a world where this data doesn't help us solve some of the biggest challenges with infant care. And some of those challenges are, respiratory infections, congenital heart defects, sleep apnea, SIDS, SUIDs, some of these huge issues, and Owlet is creating this largest database ever. So I want to talk for a second, and now we've kind of gone through some of the investor pitch slides and what we're doing and why it's a big opportunity and why it's going to make a huge impact in the world. I want to now go back to like the early days when we were first starting Owlet, because when we were first starting Owlet, it was just me, my 2 co-founders that were also students, and we had never started a company before. We had no idea what we were doing. And we were in classes very similar to this, learning from other entrepreneurs how to start a company. And one of the most important things in that idea phase is to properly validate your idea before you spend all of your time and energy working on the company. And so this is where the slides get less pretty because we don't have our graphic designer do this. But when I look back and I say, like, why is customer validation important in the early days? I think about how much time I've spent. So the 5 early employees at Owlet, we've now totaled over 36,000 hours working on Owlet, right? When you look at the 41 employees we've had on average over the last year, that's 85,000 hours dedicated to Owlet. When you look at the money that we've raised over $11 million in venture funding or NIH grants or venture debt. All of these resources and time are going into a few basic assumptions about our business and about the willingness of customers to buy this product. All of these hours, most of the hours and all of the money came before we actually launched the product, when you think about that, before we'd actually sold a unit. We'd done some pre-sales, but it's really amazing how much went into this before we'd actually proven that this was going to be successful. And the results of great validation are very apparent in your growth and in customer satisfaction. So we now have 73 employees. Our Net Promoter Score, which measures satisfaction, is 55, which is comparable to Netflix and your iPod and your iPhone. Parents love the product. We have great Amazon reviews. We're doing $20 million a year in revenue, and we're growing like crazy. We have over 50 million views now on our content in our Facebook videos. And that's the result of great validation. So I want to talk about how we validated Owlet and how we think about Owlet. We've also had a lot of recognition. This is a kind of a funny picture, but how many people here have heard of the marshmallow kind of structure building activity? There's a few people. This is really common, but I attribute all of our success, and we're still early, we're still losing money, we're still a lot to prove. but I attribute all of our success to following the principles that you learn in this marshmallow tower building activity, which was one of the first things I learned about entrepreneurship. This activity, there's a scientist or a guy who goes around and he'll get groups of engineers, designers, CEOs, and then like elementary school aged children, and he'll give them a certain number of spaghetti sticks, tape, a string, and a marshmallow. And you have a limited amount of time, and whoever builds the largest marshmallow tower wins the contest. And he talks about how you would assume that CEOs and engineers would be the most effective at building these great structures, right? And that they would win a higher percentage of time and have a higher average height in these marshmallow towers. But what actually happens is that the elementary school kids and some of the designers do the very best at this activity, because the CEOs, they'll spend a lot of time trying to figure out who's going to own which piece of the project. They'll piece out the work. They'll spend a lot of time organizing how this tower is going to be built. They'll start building the tower, and then when they have 30 seconds left, they put the marshmallow on top. And you can guess what happens. The tower starts to lean one way, and they've already used all of their resources and all of their time, and they can't fix the tower in time. So very rarely do they actually get a structure standing. But the elementary kids, they go about it differently. They take the marshmallow, they stick a spaghetti stick in it, and they start to build under it. And every so often, they're checking to see which way the tower is leaning. So they focus a lot on that marshmallow. And they actually end up with a standing structure at the end of the activity, which is really interesting. And they compare it to startups and to entrepreneurship, because you have these assumptions, right? And assumptions about how your ideas are going to work. And they're always wrong in the beginning. And so that tower starts to lean, and you have to constantly be checking with your customers which way the tower is leaning. So we embodied this principle at Owlet, and we made sure that we stuck really close to our customers, and we were always checking to see which way that marshmallow was going to fall. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So the first thing we did, the Owlet actually originated from the discovery of this technology of pulse oximetry that's been used in hospitals for 30 years. And the original idea was actually that the cord that they have attached to these big boxes in the hospital was a pain for nurses, because disoriented patients would pull the cord off of their finger, and an alarm would sound, and the nurse would have to come in and check on the patient. It's a really fantastic idea. Eventually, all of this technology is going to be wireless. But the nurses were really excited about it. What we learned, though, when we started to survey these hospitals was that the nurses were excited about it, but this system was so entrenched in the hospital network that the customer, which is your hospital administrator, really didn't care. It wasn't a huge cost to them. They weren't hearing about it, and they weren't excited about spending money to change out their technology platform for something that was just wireless. So at the same time, we were thinking about other applications of the technology, and my wife and I have some things from our history that kind of inspired us to think about using this technology for infants. But when we started to talk to parents about, and then there was these big companies that were also in the way to get this hospital technology changed. But when we started to think about using this for babies, the response from parents was overwhelmingly positive. The idea that you could monitor a baby's heart rate and oxygen levels in the home and have that peace of mind, they were very excited. And so we made a little video. I remember going to the BYU sewing lab. I had a girl there sew a sock for me. I bought a light from Radio Shack, and I put it in the sock, and made a little video with my phone, and entered it into a competition. That got picked up by Mashable and Gizmodo and some of these tech websites. We started to get hundreds of emails from parents begging us for the prototype that we had in the video. I had one mom ask if she could call me. She wanted to give me $500 for this prototype, and I had to explain to her, this is just like, it doesn't work. It's not even what we said it was. It's just to kind of explain the idea. Some really amazing early validation. And one of the biggest things that I learned from validating an idea is there's two core ways, in my opinion, that you can get a real sense for your idea. Number one is the look that people have in their eyes. I've shared a lot of ideas with different people, and you can always tell if they're really actually excited about it or not. And you don't talk to your wife or your mom, because they're practiced at giving you positive feedback, right? So you talk to strangers, and you look at the reaction that they have in their eyes, and you can tell when it's genuine and sincerely interested in your idea. And I've had a lot that they'll nod their head and they'll give you a condescending kind of like, that's a great idea. But you have to look at the eyes. The other thing that you need to do is figure out if they're actually willing to pay for it. You can do a lot of surveys and ask customers if they're willing to pay. And the answer, you'll always have some sort of willingness to pay. But it's not until they actually have to buy the product that you'll find that out. And so Owlet, really early on, we opened up a pre-sales button on our website. And we let parents come in and pre-order the product. And we were able to test with 50,000 different people that came to our website, different price points and willingness to pay. And we realized that parents really did want the technology. Not only were they excited about it, but they were willing to pay for it. And that was really important because remember, after this is all before we had raised really any money. After that, we raised $11 million on those assumptions. That story that I was telling to investors. And so you want to make sure you have it right, because as you start to raise more and more money, that the weight on your shoulders just gets greater and greater, and you start to second guess what you're doing, and you've got to have that early strong validation that to go off of. And so the solution is also a really important thing to validate. We had to know that we could take hospital monitoring, which is not appropriate for a home setting, and make it appropriate, and know that we could do that on a budget and with a high degree of accuracy. So we had to validate a lot of these really important technical challenges early on with our team. And we did it in the cheapest way possible. We started by just taking some of these hospital monitors, and we'd take them to just families that we knew in the area, and we'd let them sleep with the monitor overnight, and we'd look at the data that came from that and ask parents about their experience. And we just started as lean and as inexpensive as possible to get as much data and feedback as we could as soon as possible. We're on our 364th iteration of the fabric portion of our sock. You can't design a wearable fabric product on a computer. It just doesn't work. There's so many different foot sizes. A baby's foot triples in size the first year. They're all different. And so you have to go into a lot of homes and get feedback and constantly iterate. That's where a lot of the work happens with creating a business. It's just that really early validation. So I want to go through a case study because I don't think that the idea of Owlet, it's a great idea and it's has a lot of merit to it, but I'm not unique in thinking of it. There are a lot of companies that have tried to do this and are trying to come out with monitors that measure a baby's health. Owlet has by far been the most successful, and I think it's because we followed, again, some of these marshmallow principles. And I want to talk about a case study that is just really interesting for us to look back on. You see Owlet here on the left and a company called SPROUTLING on the right. Owlet was started by a bunch of college students, and SPROUTLING was started by some of the San Francisco area top engineers and designers. And we started the companies at about the same time. The SPROUTLING team, these were ex-Google, ex-Apple. If you guys have heard of IDEO, it's the top design firm in the world. That was kind of the DNA of this company. They had years of experience designing products, and they're kind of the Bay Area darling. They raised a ton of money early on, $2.5 million before they'd even done any validation, and it's because of their background. And so this was the team right after we had launched our pre-sales. They kind of came out and said, hey, we've raised this money just so that people didn't think they were second to market. And we were honestly really scared of this team. And then you've got the Owlet team, and we're just like a bunch of kids, really, right? Like we're just out of college, or some of us were still in college. We had never started anything before, right? Like we're the most inexperienced team you could put together. And our funding came from winning competitions at BYU. That's how we started. So you had these two teams that were starting at the same time. SPROUTLING took a very outdated approach at starting a business. They wanted to keep everything concealed. You couldn't really figure out what they were going to create. It was all behind closed doors. You weren't really able to see it on their website. And so they wanted to perfect the product internally before they released it to the public. They also chose form factor over functionality. In the beginning, we were both trying to get the baby's heart rate and oxygen levels as a way to give parents peace of mind. Owlet had to create this kind of sock design to be able to do that because there's a spot on the foot that you can get a really accurate read. And they decided to go with an anklet design because it just looked better and it felt better. And we had early on, before either company had launched their products, everybody told us their product was better because it was an anklet design, right? And then they also got really focused on these aspirational benefits of, like, this is the quantified self era of Fitbits and everything. There's so much data. They wanted to do something with the data. So they started to look at things like, when will the baby wake up? How long will they sleep? What's the mood of the baby? They didn't have a heart rate alert. It was just, is the baby's heart beating or not? It was just very data focused. Owlet took a completely opposite approach. Day one, we released the product publicly for feedback. This was our first prototype and CAD model. It looked like a big cast. This is the sock that we had sewn at the BYU Sewing Lab. That's a PowerPoint kind of presentation that we made for the app. And we just put it together and we showed it to the world, right? And started to get feedback. We launched pre-sales before the product was perfected. It was basically, our pre-sales product looked very similar to this. We're selling it. And we just went out to the world, and we listened really closely to our customers on what they actually wanted with the product. And what we found was, and we could do all the same things Sproutling could do, right? Like we can measure sleep quality. We know the sleep cycles of the baby. We know what position they're in, if they're on their back or their stomach. We know nobody really knows what mood they're in, but you maybe make some claims around mood. We could also do heart rate and oxygen. So we surveyed our customers that were pre-ordering the product, and we said, what's most important to you? As we go out and actually build this product, what do you want from it? And overwhelmingly, parents just wanted to know that their baby's heart rate and oxygen levels were normal, and they wanted an alert if that changed. It was very, very simple. So Owlet focused on that. That was the primary benefit we were going to focus on. Sproutling didn't have customers, right? They had a lot of money, but they didn't have any customers. And so they started to focus on things that were maybe cooler to them, right? More popular with data. And so they were really focused on sleep, position, mood, and other benefits, even though we started with kind of the same mission. So about a year later, Sproutling launched this crowdfunding campaign. They launched a pre-sales campaign after the product was perfected. They had this beautiful video that was really funny. And they had 1 million views. They had 1 million views on their video in the first 2 weeks. And we just thought, for sure, we only had 30,000 views on our video. So we kind of extrapolated our pre-sales to theirs, and we're like, they did such a better job. Everything we've done, all this customer validation was for nothing. They obviously figured it out better than we did. But we learned really quickly that they had actually spent a ton of this money that they had raised on the marketing campaign. They had driven and paid for a lot of those views, and they only sold about $200,000 worth of monitors, and they spent $300,000 on their marketing campaign. So it was a huge failure. They went out, they'd spent 2 years developing this product, they'd raised $2.5 million from investors, and they finally showed it to the world, and the world didn't like what they saw. And Owlet, we had 30,000 views, and we calculated it, and our conversion rate was 30 times higher what Sproutling's was. This group of college kids had figured it out, and these experts had not taken the proper validation steps. So when we look at the results of this kind of case study, Sproutling had a failed crowdfunding campaign, which made it really hard for them to raise money. They took a little bit more money to try and correct. It wasn't enough, and the valuation was pretty bad. And there was just too many unknowns in their product development. They were also trying to deliver, one of their promises was know what mood your baby's in, right? How do you deliver on that promise without getting egg on your face, right? Like, parents know what mood baby's in by whether or not they're crying or cooing, right? And so they had this big data science challenge that was really hard to develop. And they ended up closing the company down. They never got the product to market, and they sold the assets of the company to Fisher-Price to leverage the connected technology for toys in China. So I just think it's really interesting. It's not to say like we're smart. The lesson from this is that if you talk to your customers and you do the proper validation, you can be really successful in what you're creating. And again, the result of Owlet has been phenomenal. I mean, I'm not that smart. I'm not like this experienced entrepreneur, but we follow these principles that they teach you in entrepreneurship, and they work, and it leads to really great outcomes if you do it religiously, I guess. So I just come back to this, marshmallow activity, and it's become a theme at Owlet. Like any new idea we have, it's like just get that marshmallow on a stick and go test it. and we'll start to get feedback from customers. And I think most importantly too, if you talk about the validation phase and everything that you're doing there and the idea and kind of the principles, you know, the most important thing, no matter what business you're starting, you have to really want to do it. You have to believe that what you're starting is something that's going to give you that sense of happiness that you're looking for. And I promise you it's not going to be money, because for the first 2 years of Owlet, I didn't pay myself. The first year my wife worked as a nurse, and then after that we had our son, and she couldn't work, and so it was like sold our car. We sold a bunch of stuff and just kind of financed Owlet with the assets that we had kind of had. And it gets really stressful, and you realize in the early days, like, the chance of me actually making any money from this is very low. And so your why behind creating a business has to be a little bit deeper than that, a little bit more powerful, because it's going to be really hard. So if you're going to spend your time building something, when I look at Owlet, we're 4 years into it now. For the first 3 years, we didn't even sell anything. And there's another 10 years that we're going to be putting into Owlet before we make a change. That's a lot of time. It's like we only have so much time in our lives, and we want to spend that time working on something that's really meaningful to us, that we feel like is going to add value to the world. And that's a really important thing to get you through the tough times. So that's my presentation. Those are our learnings. There's still a lot more to learn. Still a lot of struggles that we're going through, and we're excited for the challenge, and we're trying to stay really lean and listen to our customers. So thanks, guys.
Okay, now is the fun time. We get to do questions and answers and all that kind of stuff. Let me reintroduce JR is over the Enactus group. He's going to handle one of the microphones. And so because this is videotaped, we like to make sure we hear what's kind of going on. Can you hear this microphone as well? You're good? Okay, and then Michael DePaulins is the E-Club president, so he'll handle this side of the room. JR, you got this side? JR really dressed up for this big event. It's an exciting moment, and Michael's the E-Club president. And then back in the back of the room is Matt Studebaker. Did I say that right? Matt is with the Career Center. So one of the things we wanted to do with this class is help you make connections. So if there's companies that you're working with or that you want to work with, Matt is the contact to help you make some of those connections. So feel free to visit with him after. We'll also have some companies coming in. So here you go, Michael. Yeah, you ask questions.
Can we start, Mark?
Yeah, go. I'll get out of the way.
So when it came to surrounding yourself with people that you needed help with, because obviously you were an engineer, how did you go about finding those people, trusting them that they're going to stick with you and not, leave you high and dry?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I am an engineer. I'm the wrong kind of engineer, which means my background was like the least helpful for starting a company, because I didn't study business, and I didn't study the right kind of engineering. So I had gotten to know in school people. One of my good friends was in the business school and was studying business marketing, was an entrepreneur. And then another friend that I had made was an electrical engineer that I knew had done, actually built some things before, not like at this scale, but some prototypes. And they were just the two smartest people that I knew, and I really liked them and trusted them. And so I kind of set the goal to get both of them involved in the business, and they were both young dads, and so it wasn't too hard, but I set my sights on the smartest, best people that I wanted to surround myself with, and those are the people that gravitated and when we started it together. And there's no way I would have been able to start Owlet without our CTO, my co-founder, who's an electrical engineer. He's like the Tony Stark, I feel like, of Provo. He just got this like shed in his backyard where he keeps all of his electronics. He's always building cool stuff, and he's just really smart that way. And then Jordan is like the psychologist of our group. He was always telling us to ask why. Why are we doing it? Why do customers want it? And I was kind of just like the hustler. I was just beating the drum, like, we're going to do it, So you do have to surround yourself with really smart people. But I just found the smartest people I knew and tried to recruit them. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Hey, so what skill set did you have that proved the most beneficial to you and your team coming into this project? And then maybe what are some skill sets that you had to learn along the way that also proved very beneficial?
That's another good question. I think the two things that I contributed the most to Owlet, number one was just this irrational belief that we could make it happen. And I was the guy that was out in front of the group pounding my head against the wall every day, just trying to move it forward. So it's just kind of the cheerleader, the hustler that was getting everybody together and just believing that we could do it. And then the other thing that I did that I feel like I do pretty well is recruiting great, smart people and bringing them together on a team and then getting out of their way and letting them create and build and do what they're good at. So we've hired like the VP of operations from Skull Candy, that built a 55-person team in China to do their manufacturing. We knew we had to have somebody who was really good at manufacturing. We said Skull Candy does it better than anybody in Utah, so let's go get their top guy. And we spent some time recruiting him and then let him come to the team, and we've let him run it, without stepping on his toes. And he's done an awesome job. And so that I think is another thing I bring to the team. It's just that ability to get people around the same common vision and work together and then let them do what they're good at. So.
Hey, what's up, man? So I know you said you did a lot of investing at the start primarily. There's also the flip side to that, like bootstrapping and stuff when you're starting a business. Obviously, I've heard that it's better to get some than none. So you doing the investing way, but then looking back on it, what would you recommend in what situation, investing versus bootstrapping?
Yeah. I don't have a ton of experience with bootstrapping. It comes with its own challenges, right? But Owlet, because we were designing hospital-grade equipment, we just needed a lot of money to help us actually build the product and design it. We had to hire some of the top consultants in the world in pulse oximetry. And so we needed some upfront capital. I do have some friends that have bootstrapped, and I think the experience is a lot less stressful. If you're bootstrapping, you're not taking money from other people. And so I think both are great. A lot of the best companies in Utah bootstrapped all their way there. If you think about like Qualtrics, they were in his dad's basement for 10 years. Omniture, a lot of these companies bootstrapped until they got to a serious stage of validation. I do believe, though, our investors have been fantastic. We have investors from New York, San Francisco, Utah, Colorado, all over the country, Israel. And you hear these horror stories about investors that just make your life miserable, and they're just focused on getting a return. That is important to them, but our investors have been awesome. They've been fairly hands-off. They've been really supportive. They've made great introductions. The money that we raised before we launched the product, we'd gotten the product ready for market, but wanted money to go launch it, was instrumental in our success and our ability to hire and recruit some of the top talent. And so if you have a business that can be scalable and can give a return to investors, I'm actually a huge fan of it. There are horror stories, but I think by far it's a great opportunity. And investors know they're taking a huge risk too. They'll invest in 30 companies, and they'll want 1 or 2 to do really, really well, 5 or 6 to do okay, and then they know the rest are just going to fail. So they hedge their bets, and they know that there's a chance you can fail, and that's an environment I felt comfortable operating in. So.
Thanks, man.
So mine has to do with family. So I have my own business, and I know at the beginning it's hard, long hours, no money. What did you tell your wife at the beginning about being patient, and like how did you reassure her that everything was going to be good?
Yeah. I don't think I knew what it would require.
Right.
So it was just kind of like, hey, Shay, my wife, is extremely supportive. She's like the most amazing person, and through this whole experience, she's just been supportive. She doesn't worry about having the nicest car or the nicest house, and so we were able to live on a really small budget for a long time because she was on board with it. So I know I couldn't do it without her being supportive. She's now kind of starting her own little business, and I'm trying to support her. But I think the biggest challenge is when you start a company, it just never leaves you. So even though you may come home from work at 5:30 or 6, it's like just weighing on you. And you've got to figure out how to not let that happen when you go into your house. And I'm still not great at it, but that's the biggest challenge. So if you want an area of like research and focus to like get better at, that to me is the biggest burden on our family. So
Thanks.
So you talked a lot about investors and how you were able to gain those. Like, what was the most useful, like, in networking? Because it sounds like you had some really good investors. You reached out to the VP of Skull Candy, some other people that a lot of us normally don't bump shoulders into. What vehicle did you use to get to know those investors and other people with talents? So
that's a good question. So I didn't know any investors. I didn't even know that there were really people that were willing to take a risk on a student's idea, So we had to kind of build that from the ground up. And it started with a friend whose dad was really wealthy that did some side angel investments. And I remember my first deck was like only 4 slides long. And I went to him and I was asking for $50,000. And I just kind of laid it out there. I was like, hey, these are my vulnerabilities. This is what I think this can do for the world. And he was benevolent enough to just say, I'm going to take a risk on you, and gave me the $50,000. That was kind of the first piece. And then through competitions and an incubator that we were part of, you meet more and more people, and then those people introduce you to people. So you don't have to know investors to start. It's also been really surprising to me how willing investors are to take a risk really early on. So before we had even got a product to market or had a working prototype, we raised $2 million on a slide deck and convinced them that Zach, our Tony Stark of engineers, could get us there. And there are funds called seed funds that will invest $200,000 to $500,000, and you get 4 or 5 of those funds to come together and put together a round for you. And they're willing to take that risk because, again, they know that one of their 30 companies is going to be the Facebook, and the other 29 are basically going to die. And so you go work really hard for them, and you might not be that company, but you can get some money early on. And there's a lot of it available in San Francisco and New York. Utah is the hardest place, in my opinion, to get that money because so many people bootstrap. They like to see later stage validation. But in San Francisco and New York, there's just tons of ideas and funding for ideas, which is really cool.
So I went and looked at the App Store and saw you guys have an app already and that going on. I wanted to know about the process of how you went about to create an app and, maybe some of the cost and procedures you went about creating an app in the App Store. Yeah.
So the first thing we did, I remember I went to the computer science building at BYU. The first guy I sat next to, I was like, hey, I have this idea. Do you want to build a website for me for free because I don't have any money? And he was like, sure, yeah. And so he built our website for free. So that's kind of the first software development that we did. We just kind of told him about this idea, and he wanted to help, and he wanted some experience, and that was really cool. He didn't ask for equity or to get paid. He just built it. And then we hired an app developer for $15 an hour that was also a student, and he built our first app that we didn't end up using just because we had, as a business, you learn and change, and the requirements kind of shifted. And so then we hired a firm out of Argentina that did app development at a reduced rate, but they were really good, and they could do the kind of the internet connectivity from a device to an app. And we worked with them, and it was good. It got us to our launch phase and got us through our first 9 months. Now we're completely replacing that app, and we're building it from scratch because we have new requirements. So software is very iterative, and I would start with the least expensive way to get a minimum viable kind of product out, because it's inevitably going to change almost completely every year. So just start inexpensive, and then as you validate, start hiring more expensive developers. But there are app developers at UVU and BYU that would love to jump on an idea and help you out.
Okay, we're almost there. We talked before the class today, and you had mentioned something about the advantage students have in this stage of entrepreneurial. Do you want to just address that real quick? Because I think that tied in with what you were just talking about there.
Yeah, so my parents think entrepreneurship is a 4-letter word. They just don't really understand it. They, when they went to college, you didn't just start a business, right? You went and you worked for GE for a long time. And so but the world is changing now. Investors want to invest in young, passionate people that have great ideas. There's a great network and system in place for entrepreneurship, and it's especially friendly to college students. In the beginning, we would just tell everybody we were a student, and they would open their doors. One of our big competitors, it's a hospital monitor. We told them our idea, and we said, hey, we're students, and we need some help. And they connected us to their chief regulatory officer and let us pick his brain for a long time, just because we were students. We got more startup funding and got an attorney to consult on our patent in the beginning for free. And it's just also a time of lower risk. So I really do believe in it. I'm trying to convince my brother to change his major and start a company, and my parents are fighting me on it. But I do believe that there's a lot of opportunity, and students have a unique opportunity to take advantage of that. So.